Hey guys, welcome back to Grayscale Gorilla. I am the Gorilla, and today we're going to finish up the tutorial that Chris started. I think this might be our first official two-part tutorial where Chris did all the hard work, getting all this stuff animated and building the letters and booled everything out. Actually just got done watching it, so that was really cool to watch how that was built. But now we're going to light it, we're going to texture it, we're going to composite it and finish this scene up. So I have the scene open, ready to go. And you may have seen the original. Let's just double check on what we're trying to build. This is the original piece here. Let me just play this real quick. You can see it says AMP, and then it rotates around, and we got some numbers there. So that was kind of the idea. This piece actually, I'll link it up in the tutorial here, but this piece has a lot of cool stuff in it if you want to check it out. But I thought that was kind of a clever idea, and so here we are. So we got the letters figured out. Where we left off was we have a plane effector that kind of goes through the letters here and rotates them 90 degrees. And it looks like Chris also added this target to camera as well. So now we can kind of move our camera around and it reads properly, which is really cool. So let's go ahead and set the scene up, start adding some lighting and some walls and really finish this up. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing we need to do is build out some of the scene here. So for walls, I used to use planes for walls. Lately, though, I've been using cubes because they have a front and a back, and they also seem to block out light a lot better. Sometimes planes get a little thin on the corners, especially if you're lining things up really tightly. Really kind of walls that have real thickness seems to always be a good idea, especially when you're messing with some global illumination and things like that. So I've just made it a habit to use cubes instead of planes when I'm building rooms and stuff like that. So here's our big wall. Let's go ahead and make a camera and just make sure that camera kind of stays there so we can kind of move up and around and start to build this scene here. So now we have our wall, and then we're just going to duplicate that, rotate it around, and build our other part of the wall here. We're just going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm going to hold shift so that it rotates on even 5-degree increments there. And we're just starting to build this wall here. What we really need to do is make this dude widescreen. I'm going to have to come in here to our render settings, go to output, and you can either type this in directly. You can say 1280 and then by 720. Or, of course, you can come down here and pick HD, and then it'll automatically switch to 16 by 9. I like just typing it in there, and then I lock the ratio just in case I want to change that. But that'll be our final output. And you can see now we have our widescreen, and we have our rooms here. So let's grab these cubes and kind of move them in position. So the way that the final version that we're kind of looking at here, let's go ahead and look at that. You can see we have kind of a floor, we have some walls, really simple, but we also have these light highlights that are hitting the wall, almost like there's little can lights up in the ceiling, and it's casting these nice little arcs down. It's giving us some nice natural light. So let's see if we could try to emulate that kind of look. So we have our walls here, and let's go ahead and build it at 90-degree angles before we flip it, because I think the final is going to have to be flipped around. We could also flip around our letters, but I think this might be a little bit quicker if we just leave it at 90, build our room first, and then flip the whole thing around, kind of put it all in a null, and then treat the whole room as one object, and then start to set up the scene. So let's again get rid of our camera, and let's add some light. So you can add a spotlight here, and this is going to give you some of the same functionality that we're going to use. But of course, I'm going to use the light kit lights here. So I'm going to come into my my content browser, and I'm going to go to light kit, add a spotlight. Now, a spotlight's going to have some control here. First thing we need to do is just aim it straight up. You can see we could rotate it around here. I just want to have it straight up, and I'm going to make it all the way up in the top left, and that's going to make it just straight up and down. And then I can come in and grab it and grab our movement tool and start to position it. Let's grab our walls and give it a little bit more height first. Okay, now let's grab the spotlight. And we may need to shrink the distance so it comes down a little bit. We also may need to shrink just the overall size of the light. It doesn't need to be too large. And then we just grab our position here and we position it kind of like it's projecting on the wall. So if we hit render, you can see we have a hint of what we want. But it's really dark. There's a few things that are happening that are making this really dark. One is that the default texture for anything in Cinema is this kind of dark charcoal gray, almost black kind of material. So if we first of all come in, make a new material, and just put it on our walls here, now we have some white walls. It's going to pick up the light a lot cleaner and a lot brighter, and now we're getting somewhere. So let's grab the spotlight and kind of put it into position and see how this looks. And let's go to the final camera. Let's always try to judge it from our final view. That's pretty good, but we actually want this light to be a little bit more narrow. So you can actually just grab these, just select the light, and adjust the cone angle of your light. And what that's going to do is give us a little bit more of a pronounced edge that we'll see. Okay, so let's sneak a little bit closer to the wall. Not that close, Nick. There we go. Okay, so now we can duplicate this. I'm just going to Command-C, Command-V. That's going to copy and paste it out. We're going to make 1, we're going to make 2, and let's say we make 3. Let's render. And that looks a little kind of overlappy, too much overlap. Let's go ahead and open this up. Now we have some of these. And let's do the same thing with this other wall. Let's duplicate the spotlight, and let's move this over, and here we may have to go up top here to make sure we're trying to be even. And again, we're trying to get almost like this museum lighting where we have some nice cans on the wall that are just, or I'm sorry, cans on the ceiling that are just giving us this nice little glow. And then we're going to add in all the rest of it, all the rest of the main lighting later. But we're starting with this mood lighting, just one thing at a time. So there we go. Now we have our spotlights interacting, overlapping. We have our walls that are touching here, and that's looking a little bit better. Okay. All right, let's call that a good start, and also let's start playing around. Let's see. Make sure we have 4 spotlights. Good. Now what we could do is actually grab this entire thing and rotate it, and let's do that with our camera. So now what we could do is rotate our spotlights with our wall, and then create a corner of the room without actually moving our type, because our type is all set. We don't want to mess that up. Instead, because we're in 3D, because we could do these types of things, we can move the entire room around to put our type where we want it, instead of moving our type into a corner of a room, if that makes sense. So there we go. We have our corner. We have our type here. Everything's coming along pretty good. What do we have to do next? So let's get rid of the light. I think Chris had a light in here, so we're just going to clear some of these things out so we could just start from scratch. There we go. Now we just have our lights coming down, and we also let's make sure we have nothing else in here. Also have a sky. I think the sky might be okay. All right, I think we might be okay. All right, so those are our spotlights. Let's go ahead and start to add some of our fill light. Well, for the fill light, what we're going to use is a softbox. So I'm going to pull out the softbox here. And again, I'm not on, let's remove ourselves from the camera, and let's kind of fly up and over and show you, I want to show you kind of how I want to position this softbox. If you look at the original, and it's always good to look at the original, again, not to copy this exactly, but to understand why this looks good and why it catches your eye. It caught my eye, and so it's worth knowing what in this lighting and composition and color and all these things, why this is cool. It's a clever idea as far as the type, but it also looks really nice. So let's just take a second and take a look. What we have are these little hints of light that we already set up, and then it looks like, because of this shadow, see this really heavy shadow on the left? That shadow right there lets us know that there's probably a very bright light over here. Well, also what shows us there's a bright light over here is that you can see on this 9, it has this really bright hot spot. All these things combine to let me know that there's probably, and there's also this little thing on the floor. There's probably these nice bright, maybe a window or something over here that would project onto this if this were a real room, right? In this case, let's let's set that up first, and then we'll worry about our fill light. So maybe I was going a little bit backwards. Let's do our key light right there and get this hard shadow over here, get this bright highlight, and then we'll move into the other one. So let's grab our softbox, and let's rotate it around to where that was. And you can see here, let's see if I can shrink this down, give a little bit more room. I'm trying to position it kind of over here, so I have to add a little bit of distance and then kind of rotate it around until we get to where we want. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit render. That's going to render the whole thing. One thing to keep in mind is that all of our spotlights have shadows turned on, and I don't think we need them. Well, let's just go into our spotlight and turn it from area shadow to none. And what that's going to do is, first of all, render a lot faster. And really, that's all. That's really the reason you want to do that. The other thing we might want to do on our spotlights is shrink our radius decay. And what that's going to do is, if we turn that down, the light isn't going to reach the floor as much. It's just going to hit the walls, and then it's not going to mess with the floor as much. So let's go back to our camera and see where we are. We still have these nice highlights. We may want to move them down. But now we're starting to get this hard shadow, and you can see it's starting to pop in there. Now maybe it looks a little bit too low. So let's go ahead and back into the softbox. Let's turn off our camera so we can see what we're doing here. Let's go up to the movement here and start to maybe position it up a little bit. And feeling we might want this a little bit brighter. And remember, there was like a subtle blue tone coming from over there, almost like a window, like a daylight. So let's try adding just a tint of blue. And alternatively, the lights on the wall have this nice amber color. We have this little lens flare too we could add in post. But mostly these walls look a little bit warm, and this light looks a lot whiter and a lot cooler. So that's another thing that we can do. Is come into our spotlights and add just a hint of light color. You don't want it orange, but you just like a hint of it. And that's going to offset that blue. We may even want to turn up those lights to give it a little bit more color back there. All right, so like most of these things, it's looking ugly now, but it's all about those last 10% and little pieces that you start to add together. So let's go to a place in this animation where our letters are kind of halfway between the black and the white letters. And I realize as I said that is we don't actually have that animated. So let's go ahead and animate that. You can see our plane effector is ready to go from left to right. Boom. We could just animate it like this. But of course we need to keyframe it if we want it to animate when we render. So let's sneak this over just until it starts to move. Right there looks good. Let's go to frame 0. And let's set a keyframe by hitting this keyframe button right here. It's going to keyframe basically the position scale. It'll tell you if you hover over it. The position scale rotation of this object. So we can go click, and this is a really fast way to animate. Let's go all the way to the end and move it all the way to the end until it stops moving, and hit another keyframe button there, and let's hit play. So there we go. We animated it across. We have our letters flipping around. And that will be good for now. We may have to tweak that a little bit, but let's go halfway in between and see where we are. All right, we have our nice kind of amber little tones on the wall coming through here. We have our letters that are flipping. So where do we go from here? Well, first thing I notice is a little bit of ambient occlusion might go a long way on this render, just to give a little bit of shadow and to kind of fill in this darker corner over here too. So let's go ahead and go to Effect, Ambient Occlusion, and let's just see what the defaults look like. It looks a little dark, but it's good for now. We have a little bit of shading now on the bottom. Another thing I'm noticing is that this white type is a little plain for what it is. It's just, you know, kind of basic. Nothing too much going on. And let's add a little bit of variation to our white. So let's find that white texture. Let's go to our fracture object and open it up. Let's go into some of this these letters here and find our white texture. And just by double clicking on it, it'll actually open by itself right here. So if you're ever wondering where that texture is, let's say you have quite a few textures here in your materials, and you're like, where's that white material for whatever, or the orange thing, especially if you have a lot of white and orange, or like I do, a lot of white and black and orange in your materials. Which one is which? Well, you can always double click it in the actual object menu here, and it'll open up. So now that we have it open, Let's go to our color, and under texture, let's go to gradient. What we're going to do is add a gradient to the actual letters. So let's just render right now and see what that did. That didn't do as much as if we flip it to a vertical gradient. And right there, now you're going to see we have a gradient across all of these letters. And you can see it right here. The W is going across, the H is going across. The I is a little flat. I think it's just because it's not as wide, but our E has some nice shading here. And these variations are going to help out. It's a little much. In fact, if we back out a little bit, we could probably turn down that gradient just a bit. And now it's going to give us a little bit of subtle shading without giving us too much muddiness. So that looks pretty good. Let's go and see what it looks like with the black letters. Black letters look okay, but they're really black. There's absolutely no variation in that black. It's like pure black everywhere, and we're losing a lot of the detail that we could have. So a couple ways we could fix this is by either adding a little bit of reflection so that it will reflect back some of the walls and some of the lights. We can also add a specular highlight too that will give us a little bit of variation in those blacks. So let's go ahead and open up that texture the same way we did that. And you can see here we in the editor, when you're adjusting a texture in the editor, instead of that pop-up, you can see if you double click over here, you're going to get this pop-up. One of the differences is that in the pop-up, you're going to have all these little check boxes to turn on and off your color and your reflection and all this stuff. In your little non-pop-up window, in your attributes manager, it's not going to be that way. What you're going to have instead is this basic tab that then you can turn things on, and then you'll have a tab for each one of those. So it's a little bit different over here. I'm not sure why that is, but you're going to have a slightly different interaction with the texture and the material attributes depending on how you open them up. So that's something to keep in mind. So first thing, let's add some color back into this. We do want a little bit of color. Let's go into color and make it almost black. That's going to help right there just by adding a little bit of something to bounce off of. The other thing we need is some specular. And let's go into our specular and really turn it down. Let's widen it out and then really tone it down. But what that's going to do, if we hit render now, you can see it is still black, but now we're starting to get some variation. We're going to have slight variations on the gradients depending on where the lights are and all that other fun stuff. So that already looks a lot better. Okay, so I think we're getting pretty close. Now, this softbox here might be in the way, depending on how far back your camera is and how you want to set up your scene. If it ever is, you can always turn that off. You can go to your softbox, go all the way to the bottom, and say scene by camera, no, and also visible in editor, no, and that'll just get rid of it altogether. It'll still render the same. It'll be identical, but now it'll be the heck out of there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I like our blue. Might be a little too blue. Let's tone that back just a little. You can see a little bit of color goes a long way in those lights. And let's go to a halfway point here. Ooh, whack. We can spell whack. Dude, I like that. That's like 90s, right? That's whack. Do people still say that? All right, here we go. We got some reflection going on. I think that's reflection, right? Let's check our white material. That's the floor. So again, we could just find it in our scene here. Double click on it, it'll open up. And yes, we do have some reflection. And it is quite a lot. So let's go to Fresnel and just add that and see where that gets us. That's already a lot better. This CT here was giving me a little bit of problems when I was playing around with it when starting to light it. And that's because it's kind of this round shape here. When it's facing us, we get a lot of interesting things. You can see on the top, we're getting a lot of reflections from these lights. And on the bottom, it's really going to a really dark gradient here. It's really almost going all the way to black. And this is the white side of the type. We should be able to make this as white as possible and kind of make it stand out a little bit. And the way we could cheat that is to add a little bit of luminance. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to add a little bit of luminance, go into the luminance tab, and then just kind of tone it back a little bit. You don't want a lot, but you just want to punch out some of that muddiness and really make it pop a little bit. It's also still a little hard to read, and that's because I think our walls and stuff are a little too bright to begin with. If we tone this back, you can see in the original what they have is they have blue type, so it's a little easier as well. But they have these kind of medium gray, lighter to medium gray walls that are then tinted a little bit off white with these lights and stuff. So that's something we could fix by going to our wall texture and going to color and just toning it down. We might as well add a little bit of that warmth as well. You can see I'm just barely offsetting these colors to add a little bit more red in general to our scene, and that, again, a little bit goes a long way. There we go. That's looking better. It's making our text a lot easier to read. Let's do the same thing to the floor as well. Let's go to the floor and go to our color, and again, let's just tone it back a little bit and also add a little bit of warmth, and that's helping the readability a ton. That's great. Okay, so there's that. All right, and the glossy floor texture, in case you want to see how that is built, looks like Chris built this with some reflection and then some blurriness. And you can turn this up or down depending on how long it's taking to render. Blurry reflections can take a long time, but they are pretty good looking. You can see when we render, we're getting these nice reflections where we're right up close to the letter. It's more visible than further away. It kind of bleeds off into some noise here. So if you ever want that kind of reflective floor, but not perfect, add a little bit of blurriness, and that'll help out. Now, your samples will matter if you're getting any sort of noise or buzziness with animation. You may have to tweak some of this. And as always, the minimum and maximums can both go up roughly at the same time. It's a lot of voodoo magic. Whenever you see these minimum maximum accuracy, they don't all work the same. So you really do want to try out some different settings here. It's something I should probably jump into and learn a little bit more about. But just know if you're getting buzziness or noise, check out those settings. So there we go. We got that's already rendered, Nick. You don't have to do that. Let's render whack again and make sure that's looking okay. We're definitely going to have to turn up the anti-aliasing before we render. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to best and go to 1x1, 2x2. This usually kills most basic reflective anti-aliasing problems. If you're still having some noise or still having some buzziness or anything on your angles and it's really stair-steppy, you could turn that up to 1x1, 4x4, or even higher. But this, I find, usually gets rid of it. All right, we talked about that fill light. Let's go ahead and add it before we prepare this for render. And to add that, I'm just going to duplicate my softbox. I'm going to turn off my camera, kind of move out. And in this case, I'm going to turn the visibility back on, visible in editor. And I'm going to rotate it around here and just kind of make it a general fill light for the whole room. I feel like there's quite a lot of contrast, and we can kind of kill some of that and kind of open up the scene a little bit. It's almost like a gamma in a way. Just by adding a little bit of light, a little bit of fill to your scene, you're going to start to fill in all those little shadows. So that already is making this shadow a lot less visible. It's a lot more subtle. It might actually be too bright, but it definitely filled in a lot of those shadows. Let's turn it down a bit. There we go. That's looking pretty good. All right, so we still have our nice, pretty nice little shadow here. We have our reflective floor. We have our wall, and you know, the compositing is going to help this a lot. But I think we have the right starting point to actually kick this out and render it. So let's prepare this to render. Let's go to standard renderer. Let's go to output and go to all frames instead of current frames. Let's go to save. You can pick where you save it right here. There's no alpha channel in this case, but if you ever need it, it's right there. We have our anti-aliasing on. We have our ambient occlusion on. We're all set to go. So I think we'd be ready from here. You hit Shift R, and it's going to render out into the picture viewer. Oh, there's a little popcorn, a little preview there for something else we're working on. But I think I have the old render here. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. So here is the final render. Let's see if I could just shrink this down a little bit. And there you go. That is the one where I was just testing things out, and that's where it ended up, right? And this is what ended up going into After Effects. So I think we covered it all here. We got our spotlights, we have our walls, we have our scene, we have everything ready to go. And of course, you can make this say whatever you want, especially because Chris showed you all this great espresso that you could use to build your own little rig here. So you can come in and build your exact letters and fill that up. So you can make this say whatever you want, and you render it out. And then, as always, I wanted to show you a little bit of the compositing in After Effects, and just kind of give you an idea of how much further you can push things and change things when you get out of your 3D program and start to mess around with all the stuff that some of it you can't do in cinema, or you shouldn't do. In other words, like I always say, composite everything. Never a render is never finished until it's run through some sort of compositing tool, even Photoshop if you're working with stills. So here we are. I'll try not to preach about it anymore, and let's show you what we did. Here's the original. You can see just right there the difference between the original and the full render here. A lot has gone into it, so let's go step by step. First of all, we have looks like a little lens flare here and a lens flare here, so just a little bit of popping some flares in here, and that's first of all pulled directly from what they have. You can see they have these nice little flares and these nice little stripes here. This starts to give it a little bit of atmosphere. You can see we start to get some lens effects, and again, lens flares overdone are always, you know, just lens flares overdone, but a well-used one is always helpful. And then from there we have some glows. We have a little blue and a little orange glow here, just to give it, and that's just to give it again some atmosphere, something to bounce off of. That's not just a flat render. You know, room has dust, and room has imperfections, and your lens has dust on it, and the chip that you would have taken that camera with has junk on it, and the world has things wrong with it. So, you know, start to screw stuff up a little bit. Next is your vignette. That's on top of all of your adjustments here, and then above that is the color correction. Now, I have a pretty strong color curve on this. You can see really it's a big gamma push with the blacks intact here. So from there you can see our blacks are stay pretty even a little crunch on our blacks, but then our gamma really gets pushed up. I mean, compared to where it was here, you can see all the way to there, it's a really bright gamma lift. And to me, it just brightened up the whole thing. Now, it's not as clean and as natural as this one, but as always, I was playing around and I thought that started looking pretty good. If you don't like that amount of contrast, you could always pull that back down, but I'm gonna leave it where it was. The next one here, now this is blurring the corners. Here I'm using first of all some real smart motion blur, just to give our letters a little bit of blur as it rotates, and we also have some Frisch Lift depth of field that is using this this composite here. Let me shrink this down. It's using this little scene I made just with a white solid that's blurred onto a black solid, and what it's doing is it's pulling the black pieces out of focus and the white pieces in focus. So it's just this subtle little corner blur as it gets close to the edge. Kind of, again, screws up your lens a little bit. Maybe it's a little overboard for this, but I missed Frisch Lift, so I wanted to play a little bit with it. The null is actually, if we turn off our Real Smart, just because that takes the longest to render along with the blurriness, if we turn that off, you can see we have a subtle zoom in through this whole thing. You can see, especially if you look out here, you can see the frame kind of zooming in as we go. So here we're adding almost a fake camera move just by scaling it all up. And what I did to scale it was I made all of these other layers. Let's open this up. I'm going to select them all and just pull them up. All of these layers from here down that we've already looked at are parented just like this. I grab this pick whip, boom, parented to this null. And then if I hit U to see all of the keyframes, you can see all we have is a little bit of scale from 100% to 105% over the course of these 8 seconds. So what that gives us is this really nice subtle little camera zoom without any re-rendering or anything like that. And really you can get away with 5% scale. I wouldn't go much above 110% larger than your scene. But you know, you can get away with 110%. Don't tell anybody I told you that. But usually nobody's going to notice. All right. What's above that? That's it. Above that is just our fade ins and outs. If I turn that on, we have this nice little fade in, and it's really just a crank of our input and output, and also a gamma shift. So it's kind of coming in really natural here. You can see the histogram is animating from here to normal over time, and then it just fades out the same way. So that's just our fade in and out, and that's our whole scene done. So if you guys make something cool with this, if you change numbers into letters, models into other models, whatever you're trying to build with this kind of thing, don't forget to post it in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something, and have fun with cinema, have fun with After Effects, have fun with this stuff. It's the summer. Go swimming a little bit, but then get your butt in there and render some. You know what? Swim while you're rendering. That's the right answer. Okay. Have a good one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in another tutorial. I already said that. I have something else to ask you. I remember what it was. What do you think about these split tutorials? If you made it this far, hopefully it means you liked it. But this whole idea of Chris being able to show you some more complicated stuff, some more espresso, some more digging a little bit further into cinema than, frankly, I can show you anymore, and then handing it off to me to do some of the stuff that that I really enjoy doing, which is a lot of the lighting, the compositing, the finishing, the last little touches, and getting the final one out, talking some of the other parts of it. Anyway, this was our first one. Just like to get your opinion as well on how these work. I think they might be pretty helpful down the road when we start to get into more complicated stuff. A lot of people are bypassing what I know about cinema, and that's a great thing. But I want to be able to show you more stuff, and I think Chris is going to help out a lot with that. So I'd like to get your opinion. I'm already feeding you answers, so just put them in the comments. I'll see you in another video. I'm out of here. I'm gonna go swimming. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.